Hello, and welcome to my night's devlog about ant warfare, a strategy game I'm working on where you lead an ant colony to war against its neighbours. It's been a while since the last devlog, but I've made good progress. This includes finishing the multiplayer game mode, completely reworking the ant movement system, and making AI enemy colonies smarter. So one of the first things I did was improving the main menu art, which looks a bit boring at the moment. This required quite a lot of experimentation, and I still wasn't completely happy with the end result, but I don't want this whole video to be about the main menu, so I decided to move on to working on more exciting things. I'm working on the multiplayer mode of the game using Unity Netcode, and as mentioned in the previous devlog, there were a lot of errors, mostly to do with synchronization of pretty much everything you can think of, so health, food, even sound effects. There were even some errors which would just cause the game to crash, so yeah, it's not ideal. I fixed most of the problems by just making sure all the processing was done on the host player, and I just used remote procedure calls or RPCs to update all the other client players. So yeah, multiplayer is now fully working, and you know what, I do feel like I'm getting a bit better at multiplayer development. Next, I wanted to improve the look of the LAN game settings menu. I was trying to think a bit more about my use of colours, and I think it turned out pretty well. I also added a command display with nice little icons so that the player can see what command they're giving at the moment. Something that I've been meaning to improve in the game for a while now is the camera movement. It's something that might not seem that important at first, but makes a massive difference to how the game feels to play. I tried to add some slight smoothing to the camera movement, but ran into some errors with the camera rotation. At the moment, the camera rotates with the player, but I had the realisation that actually there's no reason why the camera needs to rotate, so I just got rid of it. Looking back at it now, I do think that this was the right choice, and the rotating camera from before these changes makes me feel a little sick. I don't know why I didn't change it sooner, to be honest. To try and make the movement of ants feel a little more natural, and also help combat the problem of being unable to walk through a cluster of tightly packed friendly ants, I wanted to make ants move a bit more randomly. This seems like something that shouldn't be too complicated to implement, but due to how the movement code was already written, this was made much more difficult, and I ended up with a buggy mess. For some reason, whenever anything goes wrong, the ants just decide to start spinning round really fast. I was starting to get a bit lost in my old convoluted code, so I decided it would be best to just completely rework the system so that it's much simpler and clearer next time I want to change it. As with lots of things in game development, this took longer than expected because I ran into quite a few bugs. I was also busy with exams around this time, so I'd leave the game for a few days, then come back to it and have to remind myself of what I was actually doing before. I did get it working nicely in the end though, it just took a couple of months. I'll just very quickly go over how it works. So I have one method, movement decision, which funnily enough makes a decision on which type of movement to follow. For example, following the player, the nearest food, or the nearest enemy. This then calls another method, for example, move towards nest, specific to the type of movement, where some random variation can be added to the target coordinates. Finally, the ant will move towards the target coordinates in another method, which uses the navmesh pathfinding system. This is where I deal with playing the walking animation and updating the position of the food that is being carried, if it exists. So the final big feature I planned on working on is improving the decision making of the AI controlled colonies, making them seem smarter and more unpredictable to play against. So at the moment, the AI colonies must wait a certain amount of time before spawning workers, which means they might not spawn any workers even if they have the money, or food, to do so. It's clearly not the most efficient, so I updated the spawn system, splitting it into 3 phases depending on the size of the colony, small, medium or large. When the colony is small, so up to 5 ants, it will focus on spawning workers as they're cheaper and more efficient for gathering food. When the colony is medium sized, so up to 30 ants, it will focus on being more balanced and spawning 1 soldier for 2 workers to not only protect itself but also start harassing other colonies. When the colony is large, so up to 50 ants, we'll focus on just spawning soldiers until the colony size limit is reached. This is because colony size limit starts to become more of a limiting factor, and focusing on quality over quantity is more important. The AI colonies must also choose when to attack other colonies. Weaker colonies will be less likely to attack than stronger ones. The way that I determine the strength of a colony is based on the total food cost of all its ants, but soldiers are worth double their normal food cost because they're usually more specialised for attacking. At the moment, if colonies decide to attack, they'll attack a random enemy colony, as I think this leads to less predictable gameplay. The length of attacks and the time between attacks is also randomised. After those fairly minor changes, I can definitely say that the AI feels a lot more challenging to play against, and even the easy AI seems to have a similar skill level to most human opponents. The extra challenge definitely makes the game feel more fun for me, which is a bit dangerous because I don't want to get too distracted playing the game rather than actually working on it. But I think it's a good sign that even after all this time I still enjoy the game. There were several other more minor improvements I made, like removing the food collider so that ants can easily walk over food, adding some checks to the IP address input, and fixing some problems with the tutorial. After making all these changes, I was a bit nervous to try and build and run the game, and I was half expecting the game to be broken, but to my surprise, everything seemed to be working as expected. Right, so what's next? I think the next feature I want to add is some kind of research tree or upgrade system. It's another way to help make different species feel more unique. I don't have the time to make it really big and complex, but I still quite like the idea of having to choose between 2 or 3 different options for upgrades, and hopefully it adds more strategy to the mid to late phases of the game. The upgrades would have to be bought with food, so the player will have to make a choice on whether to buy more ants or whether to buy an upgrade. Potential ideas for upgrades could be to do with increasing food income, adding defences to your own nest, increasing the max number of ants in your colony, or providing permanent buffs to your ants like making them faster. If you have any ideas, feel free to let me know. I'd also quite like to update the music in the game. Maybe it's just the fact that I've spent so much time listening to it, but I'm starting to get a bit annoyed by the music in the game at the moment, and I think I can definitely do better. That's all for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.